Driving tired is as dangerous as drinking and driving. That is according to brand new research. And soon, the police could be able to test your blood to find out if you're at risk of falling asleep at the wheel. Apparently, this happens in Australia already. Joining me on the programme, sleep behaviour expert James Wilson and motoring lawyer Nick Freeman. Nick, we got a view of you there prematurely, but it's never too soon to see you. So let me start with you. Good to have you on the programme. The idea that driving tired is as dangerous as driving drunk. We're quite used to those signs on motorways saying don't drive tired and go and have a rest and go and have a coffee and walk around and don't do it. Do you think very often we don't listen though?
We absolutely don't listen. We've known for a long, long time that basically if you're driving while tired, it is as dangerous as drink driving. In other words, you're 4 times more likely to have an accident. And we do know that every time there's an accident, one of the issues under investigation is, how did you sleep last night? Were you tired? Did you fall asleep? Mm-hmm. So it is already an issue. What they're trying to do is crystallize that issue in the sense that there is a specific charge by fixing and taking a blood sample and trying to work out an algorithm that's going to actually work for everybody. And I think that's the difficulty, because some people work on very little sleep and can be very active and very focused, and some people can have an awful lot of sleep and be very tired. So yes, it's a very difficult situation, and I'm not sure it's actually going to achieve anything, because if you have an accident and you've fallen asleep and there's no alternative explanation, you will be prosecuted in any event, whether it's be careless driving or dangerous driving or whatever the consequences are, an associated charge. So I'm not sure how much further it's going to take us, and it is going to be very difficult to measure. And also, people who are tired, they might take stimulants, such as they might keep having a coffee, they might stop, and they might, for me, a better test will be what they used to do with the driving whilst unfit. Mm-hmm. If there's a suspicion you're tired, I'd like to see a test whereby your reactions, etc., are measured rather than taking blood, because I think it's very hard to be subjective about something, as objective about something that's so subjective.
I mean, as you say, the kind of vagaries of bespoke individual response to tiredness are huge. Plus, of course, the notion that you can be enormously perky when you set out to do something. And it isn't that you didn't sleep, you did sleep, you're very jolly and you're full of vim and vigour. And then for some reason or other, overcome or beset by a wave of tiredness. These kinds of things are terribly unpredictable, aren't they? Or just lulled into a delightful somnolent stupor by a combination of the heating in the car and something really, really boring on the radio. Talk TV, obviously, which keeps you awake and vibrant and absolutely on the edge of your seat at all times. But I mean, there are all sorts of things that conspire or can conspire, partly driving along a really repetitive and boring motorway that kind of can jolly you into sleep, even though you're not particularly tired and probably wouldn't show up as tired on a blood test were there such a thing to be had.
Yeah, I mean, we are aware that lorries are limited in terms of how far they can drive, how long they can drive, under what time. And it does strike me strange that lorry drivers have to take rest every so often, and car drivers are not subject to that. I tend to drive everywhere, so I have in a day driven over 1,000 miles. But I'm acutely aware that you need to stop, you need to make sure you're refreshed, dehydrated, hydrated, etc., etc. And in instances where you feel tired, you pull over and you rest. I'm not suggesting that that's something that people should do, drive that far, but it's a very subjective thing. And I think that's the difficulty, and I think it's already covered in the law. But if they are going to introduce it, I think an actual physical test, a mental test, rather than a blood test, would actually be more appropriate.
Let me bring James Wilson into all of this. So people's habits, the idea that sleep can creep up on you, the idea that some people, as Nick says, function very highly. Margaret Thatcher was one on very little sleep at all. Others burn out within seconds if they don't get the full 8 hours, and then some. So how can this be incorporated into some kind of law that will keep us safer and other people safe? Obviously, that's the objective of the whole thing.
I think, like Nick said, I agree that it's going to be very, very hard to actually say who, because we're all, as I think we've touched on, we're all different, and some people can survive on very little sleep, even if the markers are in there. In terms of it is very much objective in terms of like if this is showing, how do we then translate that into something that we can understand? So if we said, well, you need to have 8 hours sleep to be able to drive, you might have an 8 hours sleep, you might have like something like sleep apnea where you're stopping breathing every 30 seconds. Naturally, your quality of sleep has been appalling, and you're driving. You may be meeting the criteria that's been set down connected to any law, but you're driving in a way that in a condition that's quite unsafe. And I think one of the issues is with sleep is that it's not something you can't make yourself sleep better. Most of the people I work with who are poor sleepers, something like this where you're criminalising their poor sleep, that's going to make their sleep worse. And there isn't a great amount of sleep support in the UK for people. If we're going to start saying being sleepy is a crime, I think we've got to also put in place a lot better support.
But you're not saying that, though, are you, Nick? You're not saying that poor sleep is a crime. You're saying if you drive a car after poor sleep, that might be potentially be a crime.
That is the crime. I think we all agree it's how we measure that. And I'm suggesting something that's a subjective test for each driver. Because, if someone said to me, right, you need 8 hours sleep, otherwise you can't drive, I'd never drive a car. I'd never, ever have anything like 8 hours sleep. And, we sometimes go to bed and how do we know how we sleep? We think, I didn't sleep very well. We might be right, we might be wrong. The sleep might be interrupted. Do we know how long we were awake for? Do we know how long we're dreaming for? It's to be honest, it's just going to be impossible to work out, to legislate for. But what they can legislate for is if there's a suspicion that the accident has been caused, or you're driving. I don't think it should be just an accident. I think there should be a specific offence of driving whilst fatigued.
Yes.
Something along those lines. And in the same way, they used to test people for driving whilst unfit. That wasn't a blood test. What they used to do was make them walk in a straight line and perform various physical tasks. That they can do exactly the same with this type of condition. And that would be fair, and that would be subjective, so everyone can be responsible for their own physical ailments, their physicality, their alertness, and it should be right that it is an offence to drive whilst tired because it is so dangerous. And if you look at the statistics, and I hate talking statistics, there is a significant number of accidents that are caused when people are fatigued. I think it's over 25–30%, and I think the collisions, the fatal accidents are even higher. So it is a significant problem that the government really needs to tackle. It shouldn't ignore it, but it needs to come up with the right formula. My suggestion is a physical and mental test as opposed to a blood test.
And just checking that you think that would be a good idea.
I think it is difficult. I think we're all different when it comes to we're all different when it comes to sleep. So to be able to say, as I start a journey, I think as you said, Vanessa, you start a journey, you might feel quite perky, but 3 hours in, there needs to be a way for people to be able to do that test before they set off, be able to do that test as they're driving, to then know they might get pulled over and subjected to that test. Sleep deprivation, we can hide the symptoms quite easily. A lot of people who are significantly sleep deprived are able to function at quite a high level with that sleep deprivation. But whether they are safe or not to drive, I think is quite difficult. The reason they're coming up with a blood test is they're trying to create something that's far more objective. However, it's still very difficult to give people an indicator. Are you going to meet this criteria laid down in the law?
All right, gentlemen, both, I thank you very much indeed for your time. Thanks for joining us. And let me tell you what's coming up after the break.